All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the May edition of the CUNY BMI Dialogues. We're so delighted to have you with us today and joining us for our conversation about George Floyd, remembering his legacy and our call to action. Obviously, in the past, few weeks, we saw the verdict for Derek Chauvin, being convicted of the crime of murdering George Floyd. But also, we know that that's not the only thing that's been happening in our communities that have been impacting Black and Brown people, not only obviously us at CUNY, but us around the world. We know that this is just the beginning of a series of hopefully accountability that we want to see happen for those who have murdered and killed Black and Brown faces senselessly and who have been protected legally for so many years of doing this. We're seeing precedents now that we're seeing that qualified immunity is now sort of being revoked, and we're able to now actually have criminal processing for those who are murdering other human beings, and it should be that way. We're so grateful for that, but we're also at a moment in our history where now, as a CUNY BMI program and also being a part of a larger network in New York State, we're able to actually kind of leverage decisions like this to help our students feel a sense of agency, a sense of motivation and information that they can use to propel themselves to leadership positions where they can actually make a change in the world that is meaningful and sustainable for the next generation. As we can all agree in the social and political climate that we're in, that it's important that we break bread and have knowledge learning sessions for our Black and Latino sisters and brothers primarily, but also for everyone, so that we can make sure that we have habit-forming, life-changing behaviors that we can share and impart to each other as best practices. So we think about this idea, right, of George Floyd's legacy. It's been a little bit over a year now since the upheaval that's caused because of his killing, and his life and the public trial around it became an emotional focal point for many of us in our communities. And we're kind of like watching with bated breath what the decisions were going to be. So as CUNY BMI primarily supports Black and Latino students, we're obviously in desperate need of having young freedom fighters who are representing the Black and Latino voices and Latinx communities, so that we can see people of character and integrity and purpose who are living with vision and experience and really acting out of their responsibility to really enhance the next level of our growth as a community. So today we're going to hear from three of those activists and those leaders that are up and coming and also are here now doing this significant work. They're going to be bringing their perspective and their value and their wisdom to the conversation that we're having today about how we can develop more action plans of justice and live in a world that's really practically providing a better world for the next generation after us. So as we're thinking about this conversation today, we're going to just have our speakers introduce themselves briefly and then share some hope, share some challenges, and share some love with us on how we can embed and sort of inculcate the ideas of unity, justice, and accountability for ourselves and for the next generation. So enjoy today. It's going to be power-packed and a lot of fun. So first, I want to start out with having our esteemed guests, panelists. Welcome. Good to see you. I would love to have you just do a quick introduction of who you are. I can read your entire bio, but I don't want to do it that way. I want to actually just start out by just saying, Jade, I know you're from DC, you're representing, and you're also got some New York roots as well, and you're doing some incredible stuff. Can you just tell the people a little bit about who you are, what you're working on, and why this conversation is important to you?
Yes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here again. I'm Jade Arrindell, native Washingtonian, also voting member of the Democratic County Committee for Kings County, which is Brooklyn. Also the founder and CEO of Victory of the People Movement, LLC, that works on undoing systemic anti-Black racism in education, media, and politics, contributor on Fly Nubian Queen Network, and an anti-racism trainer and educator.
Yeah, and just tell me a little bit about just this conversation. I'm sure you've been having these kinds of conversations consistently over the pandemic, but just give me a quick, why is it important for you to join us for this conversation? And what do you think it is that we need to hear today?
Absolutely. It's important for us to really think about punishment, creating laws and being really, really stringent on punishing what we call race soldiers who take the lives of Black people through law enforcement. We also need to talk about what has happened to George Floyd and what is happening to other brothers and sisters in our country we need to see it through the lens of domestic terrorism and genocide. And so I hope for us to really build on those points and really see this as organized crime and white supremacist terrorist organizations who have infiltrated law enforcement, the military, and the upper echelons of the legal system. And so we need to start to really talk about what punishment looks like for these terrorists.
Absolutely. Love that. That's so real. Looking forward to the dialogue, Jade. We're going to move on next to Chi. Chi, great to see you. I know you're doing some great things and people may not know who you are, but they will know who you are very shortly. So please tell people about what you're doing, what you're running for, and all the things that bring you to this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today, Sean. My name is Chi Osei. I'm a third-generation Brooklynite, lifelong activist and candidate running for New York City Council in the 36th district right here in Brooklyn. That's Bed-Stuy in North Crown Heights, my home. I am the youngest candidate in New York City history to be endorsed by the Working Families Party, which is a great organization, political pack that is packing this campaign. If elected, I would be the youngest candidate elected within my district, the youngest Black elected in New York City history. And I'm really hoping that we make history on June 22nd. So thank you again for having me here this afternoon.
Absolutely. And that's incredible that getting that endorsement at such a young age. I know how important it is to have a super PAC behind you. So we wish you the best of luck and look forward to hearing more about your platform. Just tell us a little bit the reason why this conversation is important to you. What drew you here and made you say yes to being part of this conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great question. I think many people have lost this sense of hope with everything that has happened over the past year and also just the history of Black people within this country. I believe that this June 22nd, the election that we have here in New York City, is an opportune moment to change the tides in New York City politics. There are 35 out of 51 city council seats open for election, a mayoral seat opened, Manhattan DA, Brooklyn Borough President, Manhattan Borough President. We have the chance to really enact real change on a political level here in New York City. With everything that happened this past summer and this past year when it came to police brutality, I think many people think that Joe Biden or the federal government is the sole political group that could help us. But I do believe real change can happen on a municipal level when we elect like-minded individuals that are headstrong when it comes to holding the police accountable, divesting from the NYPD, approaching healing our communities in a more holistic manner. So I'm hopeful. And I'm hopeful to talk about the hope that we have coming up this June 22nd.
Sure. Now, that's the second time we've heard some of these ideas of divesting from some of the institutions that have contributed a lot to the injustices that we see. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. Joshua Davis, this young man has been part of CUNY BMI for many years, at first at Medgar Evers, and then now he's also been supported by the CUNY BMI Pipeline to Justice program, and eventually now he's in law school, about to become a 3L. This man is also a mentee of mine who I get a chance to spend one-on-one time with a lot. And so I'm so excited to have you here joining us and bringing your perspective. Joshua, tell the people about who you are, what you're doing, and what brought you to this conversation.
Okay, so hey everyone, my name is Joshua. I was a graduate of Medgar Evers College down in Brooklyn. After I got my BS in public administration, I went on to work at Center for Integrated Training and Education, where we assist teachers and administrators all across New York State get their certification and professional development and their degrees. And then I wanted to figure out how do I be calculated and my compass, trying to figure out how do I change, be a change agent in my community. So then I, with the help of the pipeline program, got into CUNY Law School, and now I'm a rising 3L after I do this last paper for my final. So yeah, what brought me to this conversation, if I could be as candid as possible, I'm Black. I'm a Black man. Throughout this pandemic or throughout my entire life, I saw Black bodies get on the news, get paraded on the news as if this is late night television. And I think that does something to people watching TV. at home, especially if they're quarantined. They can't really get out and have other outlets to exercise whatever it is that they want, but they're stuck in a home, and that's all that's on TV. And so what brought me to this conversation was simply that, not simply because I'm a Black man, but because I wanted that perspective at the table. There's so many people that get to the table, but don't come from the places that George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, those are just to name a few people. They don't come from those backgrounds. So I wanted to maybe give that perspective at the table. Sean, I think you're muted.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And so I appreciate that perspective as well, because I think, the experience of seeing something on TV versus the lived experience of being someone who could possibly be targeted. I remember when Obama was in office and he said this idea that, Trayvon Martin could have been his son if he had had a boy. And it becomes more real when it's someone who looks like you who's being targeted in a way that represents the injustice. So I want to start out first with a real simple question. Thinking about the conviction of Derek Chauvin. Where do we go from here, and what does this conviction mean for us in our community? So I'm going to start with Jade first, and then Chi, and then Joshua. And then we'll change the order up as time goes along. So Jade, what does conviction mean for us? What does this conviction mean for us in our community?
Well, I'm not satisfied with merely a conviction. So at this point in time, I'm going to say nothing unless there are like really, really severe consequences for this suspected white supremacist by the name of Derek Chauvin. Him being sentenced and maybe even going to jail, maybe even getting a slap on the wrist charge because he has an entire police force to back him up and elected officials and some really powerful stakeholders backing him up. Let's say if he is sentenced to a number of years in jail, that's not even a glimpse of justice. Our brother George Floyd will never come back. And also, this is just one case. And so that this one case and holding one person accountable does not change the systemic genocide that we're under as Black people. So that's kind of where I see it now. I do understand and respect a lot of folks' relief, and it representing a glimmer of hope. But then I've also been looking at what the defense has been doing since that conviction. They're trying to, I think they filed a motion to get a retrial on the grounds that one particular juror, a Black man named Brandon, I forget his last name, they're trying to paint him as an activist and say that, he was biased and that he did not report that he attended the March on Washington. They have photos of him circulating with a Black Lives Matter t-shirt on and a shirt of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with the words, "Get your knees off our necks," BLM on a t-shirt. And so they're trying to say that he was already biased as he was on the jury. So my question is, how long did the defense have this photo or see these social media posts and know that our brother, the juror Brandon, I forget his name, I think it may be Jenkins or something, was actually at that march? And what does that mean? So I'm really curious to see what the defense is going to do and what this judge is going to do, and if Derek Chauvin will get a new trial. So I think it's too soon to celebrate anything or to make any implications in terms of what this means for Black society.
Yeah. And so to that point, Jade, because it may be too soon to actually celebrate, it does still speak to something that's happening in the shift in some ways, and almost drawing a line in the sand in some ways. I see, at least, and I'm wondering if you feel that way, if you feel like, even though it may not be a cause for celebration, that it is kind of pushing us in a direction of somewhere. Like, do you sense a direction that this country is going in because of something like this, a verdict, or do you think that we are exactly where we were before this trial began?
I think the good news is that it seems like that blue wall that many of these cowards in law enforcement have been hiding behind, it seems to have some cracks in it, and it may be crumbling. I'm seeing more folks in law enforcement, especially Black and Brown officers, becoming more vocal and really holding their colleagues accountable for such atrocities. And so I think that is a good thing. I'm just curious to see if that energy is going to intensify, and hopefully, they'll be supported and we can see more of that.
Yeah, I'm curious about that as well. I have another question with that, but I'm going to hold off because I want to talk to you more about that. But Chi, I'd love to hear from you and your perspective. What does this verdict mean for our community?
Yeah, I mean, period to what Jade said. I mean, a Black man is still dead. And a couple days ago, if not the next week, Ma'Khia Bryant was shot and killed by the police. There's dead bodies on the hands of these white supremacists and law enforcement officers. Nothing's changed. You know, we haven't seen real legislation passed. The George Floyd Act, which is sitting on the federal level, that doesn't do anything really in terms of protecting Black bodies. My thoughts and prayers go out to Floyd's family, but he's still dead. You know, the fact that I was getting these texts from, you know, the non-Black friends of mine, like, yay, the day the case, you know, the results were released. I did not feel happy. You know, we were cheering when over we were cheering over the fact that a law, you know, took effect for once. You know, a person killed another person, they should be going to jail. Why are we cheering for that? And how many Black people have been killed without footage like the footage that we've seen from George Floyd's death that haven't been held accountable. So, I mean, it's great that he's going to jail, as he should. I'm not cheering, or I'm not, I guess, in a joyful mood because there's still another dead Black body. But we need to keep our foot on their necks. You know, I think this is, they had to convict Derek in order to not, I guess, cause ruckus across the country once again. But we're going to keep our foot on their necks. We're going to continue to move on, not to just reform this system that isn't broken. It works for people in the way that it does, but to divest and dismantle the system that has killed Black bodies decades, centuries, year after year. And we need individuals in every sector of power to continue to keep our foot on their necks and to truly make some real change within our communities.
Yeah, that's real. That's real. It's amazing to me how simply you just put that and how clear it is. If a human being kills another human being, there should be accountability. Mm-hmm. And somehow we've created a system where we have human beings with non-human being protections. And it seems completely obvious, but yet we still choose to have this function in place. So I'm going to dive into that as well. Thank you for that. Joshua, I'd love to hear your perspective. What does this verdict mean for us?
You know, I want to echo everything that was just said by both the panelists. I think they're right. You know, I can just say that, like a couple of years ago when Mike Brown died, right, and Trayvon Martin died, I flew to Ferguson. I went down to Stanford, Florida. I had the same, you know, energy to convict the officer or convict George Zimmerman. Neither of those folks were convicted. And, you know, it really hurt me. Now, and when we talk about people participating in government, before this officer that killed George Floyd was convicted, people that I spoke to in my circle was telling me statements like, why am I voting? Why am I participating? They can't even, you know, the system don't work for me. They can't even convict an officer that shot somebody or an officer that kneeled on a guy's neck. And then when the trial started, I felt people getting more engaged, watching it, texting me. Josh, did you see what just happened? Did you see how that went? Man, I wish I was on the jury. Man, I want to participate. So I do share the same sentiments that convicting that officer wasn't enough. It did not bring George Floyd back, but it did ignite some type of level of people wanting to be involved, which I think we should highlight and make sure, because whatever system that we're talking about, if it's electing our city council, if it's electing our judges, if it's electing our school board, people have to want to feel engaged, feel like they have a stake in it. And so that's what I felt like when the officer, I don't even say his name, was convicted for murdering George Floyd. People felt like they wanted to participate. And that's what I like, because this system only works when everybody participates. You know, when people participate, we get a new president. And when people participate, folks in other states want to change the laws to limit their participation. So I feel like what that gave me was a sense of hope and the fact that people that look like me will want to participate more.
Yeah. Well, one thing I do love about what you're saying for sure is that there will be more people who look like you as we keep going on in America. Therefore, there's a chance for us to reform a system that was never designed for us, right? And so I love that the participation has changed, Georgia to a blue state, but still, it's still within a system of oppression that hasn't necessarily served us always, but we're getting somewhere, and I see the excitement about that, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And so kind of like as we're framing sort of the first part of our conversation, it also helps me to know as well from your perspective, how do you see and envision an anti-racist America looking? Like understanding like that we know that there are broken systems, there are systems that are not serving us. We're in this position where we're often, as Black and brown people, getting seconds and not getting opportunity or access. I want to kind of like set the tone with this conversation today, was just thinking about what is stopping us from having anti-racist institutions? What's getting in our way? And so I'm going to start in sort of a reverse order this time a little bit, but Chi first, then Joshua, then Jade. But just what's getting in our way of really erecting anti-racist practices in our country? Obviously, there might be some obvious things. There might be not so obvious things. But Chi, would you mind responding to that?
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, white supremacy. And white supremacy has found itself in a multitude of ways within our society. So I feel like the answer to that question in terms of what an anti-racist society looks like is a multifaceted one. I think it starts with reparations. I think individuals that have been enslaved and or have enslaved ancestors need to be repaid, for the labor that our ancestors endured to build the country that we know is the United States of America. Obviously, that is going to take time, but again, we need headstrong people in every level of government, activists on the ground, lawmakers to continue fighting for what's owed to our people. I believe that anti-racist society is a society of equity. Someone that is running in a predominantly Black district here in New York City, we're redlined, in a district where many of our city agencies, such as public education, public housing, food justice, environmental justice, are deeply underfunded, in many ways shambles. That's a response. That's white supremacy within policy that needs to change with proper leadership, with leadership that isn't tied to lobbyists such as police unions and real estate developers and fossil fuel interests. That's what I see as a step, as someone that is running to be a legislator in order to achieve an anti-racist society. But it will take time. We need individuals to have this factor of hope within us, within everything that we do, and to continue pushing for those reparations and legislating in order to achieve resources that whiter, more affluent communities receive.
Yeah, and so to your point, Chi, we're getting into some good stuff right here. All right, so let's talk about it. So reparations, right? Atonement, right, for what was never corrected or never addressed as the systemic, targeted, intentional desegregation, or segregation and disengagement of Black and brown families in this country, right? So predatory lending, redlining, all these different things that have really systemically kept Black and brown descendants of slaves from having equal access and opportunity. I think there was a governor who actually instituted a low-level reparations policy in a town in California. I can't remember the name right now. I just tried to do a Google search, and it came back with some wild success where they saw unemployment had dipped. They saw that there was sort of a basic universal income that ended up providing people a chance to have more opportunities to apply for jobs and have more opportunity to access wealth. And so when you envision that, that idea, how do you envision that being sustainable or helpful for Black and brown? How and the why? right? So the why and the how. How do we actually do this? I think the what is always going to be difficult, but just wondering if you can just expand on that a little bit more and how you can see that possibly benefiting Black and brown families going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, I just do want to reiterate some of my statements. I think I don't want to simple the answer down to answer in twofold, but it's not just throwing money at the problem, but it's the resources, that our children need. In public schools, many of our students here in this district are not given the same classes, the same amount of technology, even free Wi-Fi that students in Cobble Hill or Park Slope receive. These are the tools that we need in order to excel as a community, as a society, as Black people. I think education is a place to start, equity in education, so that individuals that look like me could go to law school like Joshua over here. We need the tools to learn how to manage our money, to excel in society, to not be held back, to not be killed by law enforcement. So I would say the answer is in twofold, but that equity does come from money going into our communities, money going into our pockets, but also resources given within many of our city agencies or communities agencies.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think a lot of times people think of reparations as just giving a check for $1 million to a person and saying, good luck, go live now. We've resolved it. So I think it's good to hear your perspective about that into resources. Joshua, what's your response to that?
Candid again. I guess I think of it like when we talk about reparations and equity, I think it's the system. I don't think that this system was created to fit everybody. And so when you try to close your eyes and imagine a system that is anti-racist or sexist or any other of those things, you will not get this system. And this system is, a capitalist system. And, I think about it in a way where it's like, I close my eyes, don't forget what's happening here. Look around the world. Everywhere you have people of color, they're getting the short end of the stick. We don't even know the COVID rates in Africa. It's not even being covered. So, I think it's the system. I think it's a system. I think if you close your eyes and try to reimagine a system that don't have, that's anti-racist, that, works for everyone, you're not going to get this system.
Yeah, good point. And I'm curious, even just Jade, as we expand on that, what is needed? What is needed to produce the kind of system that creates an anti-racist structure? What do we need to do? What is missing? What do we need?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is we need real leadership. I mean, it doesn't help to have a vice president who makes public statements, very unintelligible statements that America is not a racist country. Shout out to Vice President Kamala Harris. And it also doesn't help for President Joe Crime Bill Biden to practice a sort of benign neglect onto the Black community. We've seen him give out tangible resources, even protections and things through a number of executive orders for groups, every other group almost, outside of Black people, especially those of us who are indigenous to this country and whose ancestors of ours have originated from the killing fields, these plantations during American chattel slavery. So we can't talk about having or building anti-racist structures in government, politics, or otherwise when we have, in my opinion, vehemently anti-Black folks in the White House, when we have folks in Congress who are aiding and abetting domestic terrorists, right? We saw what happened on January the 6th. So far, justice has not been produced in a way that is satisfactory. And it seems that like when folks are perpetuating this sort of anti-Black racism, benign neglect, ignoring our birthright and our land claim and our money claim, I'm okay with getting financial payments like other groups who have gotten reparations in that form from the United States government. It doesn't help when we have an administration, a new administration that got into office off of the backs of Black and brown votes, perpetuate more benign neglect. It is absolutely ridiculous and disgusting. And so I don't foresee there being any sort of systemic changes because we don't seem to have even a democratic establishment or administration that's going to support our claims and to really, really, really hold law enforcement officials and people who are killing Black and brown bodies accountable. We know that Joe Crime Bill Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are very, very pro-cop, and that needs to stop.
Yeah, yeah. And so that is a great question here. And I think that leaves me with this sense and this feeling often of, what does it take for us to make the iterative changes that get us to a point where there is humanity at every level of leadership and of organization, right? There is that sense of equity and justice, right? So while we may, I don't know if anyone feels differently, but while we may feel to a degree that it may be impossible to just say, let's stop doing everything right now and change everything right in this moment. There might be iterative decisions that are made along the way that are behaviors that get us to becoming closer to becoming an anti-racist country or anti-racist society or organization or whatever systems that we're a part of. And so when you think about just sort of iterative process and just like little decisions along the way, like for instance, I think about, decisions that like companies have made, like, Netflix have made to really commit resources to Black filmmakers and artists. And I think about decisions that when companies decide to say, we're going to give a portion of our wealth away to really bring equitable opportunities. Are there examples out there that you see that have worked well, where organizations or institutions have actually become more anti-racist or more inclusive in a way that is actually including those who want to be inclusive? I think sometimes that word inclusive can be very triggering and potentially dangerous because we don't want to include everybody who's not being inclusive of us. But the goal is to be inclusive of those who are willing to include others. So when you think about institutions, organizations, what are some models out there that have had those iterative behaviors that contribute to anti-racist practices? And what I'll do is instead of calling names, maybe I'll just leave this one open. And whoever wants to respond first, I'd love to hear maybe some examples that you know. It might be your own organization. What are you doing to contribute to anti-racist behaviors and practices actively?
Yeah, I can take that. Many schools and school systems, school networks are engaging in a very, very rigorous undoing unconscious bias curriculum and really focusing on anti-racism. There's strategic planning that's happening around that are implementing anti-racist practices. School leadership, they're looking at even things like their student handbooks, student family handbooks, their staff handbooks, changing some of the language, changing some of the policies that are punitive, changing some of the classroom management, for example, strategies and taxonomies, which really, really focus on controlling Black and brown bodies in the classroom and being a bit more emergent in their teaching styles. We're also seeing an influx of teachers leading conversations about race and racism and really supporting young people in the classroom with having conversations about race and also debriefing a lot of the traumas and things that they're sustaining by virtue of looking at cases such as George Floyd or what happened to Ma'Khia Bryant, et cetera. And so that's where the work starts, definitely in education, and also just us being aware, all of us, myself included, being aware of our unconscious biases, how they show up, and implementing specific strategies to interrupting them in real time and correcting the harm that those biases produce and reproduce and the impact of those onto other people. I know that there are certain police forces who also, undergo this level of training. I have a colleague who works with a particular police department on unconscious bias training. So I think that for what it's worth, like they are effective and without consequences. It's like once you go through this training and you've taken part in this learning, you should be implementing this. And when you don't, these are the consequences. I think that is the next step. And I think that will be really transformative.
Yeah, that is true. So let me ask you about that, Jade, a little bit more in detail. What do you think is needed or had to be in place for the leaders of those groups that you've just mentioned to enable this training to happen? What had to be in place for that person to say, we're doing this?
Definitely a commitment to producing justice, and justice as defined by Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. is guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person who needs help the most gets the most constructive help. There has to be an unwavering commitment to producing justice for everyone within any institution. And on top of that, money, right? These sorts of trainings are not free. So there has to be a monetary investment and some funding into that. And then also time. There are other priorities that, every institution has, but we need to see folks have the willingness to prioritize this work that is ongoing and that is also very, very personal. This work has to continue even when you're not in a training or in a staff meeting. It needs to live with you in your own process and your own relationship and discovery of your own racial identity. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, that's really good. And I'm going to pivot to you, Chi, but just thinking about these leaders, right? There's some leaders that get it and say, yeah, we need to actually give more help to those who need the most help. They get it very simply. And then there's people who just don't get it and they just think only in their own perspective. So when I think about even, one of the things that we talked about recently just now was about the idea of reparations, right? And what that actually looks like. And I think about for instance, people like Mitch McConnell, one of the Senate minority leader out of Kentucky, who basically was saying, I don't know why people feel like we have to atone for behaviors that happened over 150 years ago that people alive had nothing to do with, right? So there's leaders who just don't get it, right? So what have you seen, Chi, a transition from leaders who don't get it to watching them get it? And what is needed and in place for them to actually buy into the idea of bringing equity and anti-racist practices into their organizations? How do we get people there?
Off the top of my head, I really honestly don't think I can list anybody. And at the same time, I think it's too early to say anything as well. I think anti-racist work is the work of a lifetime. George Floyd was murdered almost going on a year ago. And I need to see more work, more lasting change within every aspect that I can see here in New York City in order for me to answer that question. I still believe, almost a year after his death, that a lot of people's activism and statements on Twitter or online are still performative activism. I do not want to give anyone the badge of being anti-racist just yet. But you can definitely check in with me maybe in a decade if we see, those that are in jail for marijuana possession out of jail and the legislator that is non-Black took part in being anti-racist to do that. Maybe we'll see that, and I'll give them maybe a pat on the back for being anti-racist. But as of now, I don't think I can give anyone that honor of being anti-racist just yet. Sure. Maybe myself.
Yeah, sure. And let me ask you, what I don't ever assume that because a person looks exactly the same as me, the same skin tone, that they were always an anti-racist person, right? I don't assume that. So tell me what was needed for you to get to the point where that was a core part of who you are, of your values, and what you're bringing to any organization that you're a part of.
I did just realize that what I just said before made me sound like I was a racist before, but I've always been anti-racist. But for other people of color that may have not been on that path, or even non-Black peers of mine, I guess I've seen a shift in their mindset after the murder of multiple Black people. But again, I'm sorry, this answer is not that exciting. I can't give anyone that honor of being anti-racist just yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you. And so, Josh, same for you. You've been a part of different organizations, schools, networks, companies. In your mind, what is needed for leadership to actually enact anti-racist behavior and behaviors of inclusion and equity? What is needed to get them there? If you've seen any examples of that, and what behaviors do you think need to be in place for them to be labeled as that?
I think you need leaders that start from the bottom and make it all the way to the top. And when I say that, I mean leaders that are a reflection of who they're leading. So, for example, I don't know if this answers the question about being inclusive, but there's a group of people, right? Let's say, put it like this: there's a group of people, Black men, right, who need help. Are you going to create a program that that's inclusive, or give a program to Black men that's exclusive so that you can help that group up? So I think,
clarify that for me.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that if you have Black men that has been targeted by the war on drugs and the criminal justice system, right? I'm not saying that no other group has, but this group has been hammered. Are you going to give this group some type of benefit or some type of program or some type of that? I don't see that. I don't see that in society. I don't see where there's a program or something specific to Black men or Black women or that community. So I don't know, when we talk about anti-racism, it has to start genuinely from what group is being hurt the most. How do we bring that group up first before we bring everybody to the table? Because everybody is not coming to the table equally. Everybody's not coming to the table with just one missing arm. You got people coming to the table with nothing. And so I feel like in order to be an anti-racist leader, you have to first recognize the real issues and look at people that's been disenfranchised from the start. You have people that their dream was to come over here. There's other people, their dream wasn't to come over here. And so you have generational kind of setbacks. And, when I think about this conversation, the reason why I wanted to be a part of this conversation is because, so for so much, I hear my people saying, I don't have no hope, man. And, I just want to share, when I came back from Ferguson and Stanford, Florida, I didn't have any hope. I was depressed. I was like, yo, I can't do this. There's no such thing. I close my eyes, I don't see America. But you have to, because if my ancestors did not have hope, I wouldn't have been here. They would have jumped off the ship in the Atlantic Ocean. So I think in order to be an anti-racist leader here in America, you have to first look at the people that's been hurt the most and lift them up exclusively. Lift them up first so that they are on a somewhat equal playing field, and then everybody can come to the table. How are people going to come to the table and sit at the table and they don't got no chair? You got some people standing up, some people sitting down, some people, that's their table. It's some people's house. So that's how I'm trying to figure out, well, what leader. I don't I'm with the candidate that's running for 36. I don't necessarily give that title to anybody as of yet, because there's folks that's doing the work, but I want to. It's a lifelong thing, man.
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick, that's a brother. I like him. He sacrificed his whole salary, his whole career.
Yeah.
To kneel at the anthem. Now you got people storming the Capitol, and I'm not going to go on no more rant.
No, but I hear you. That is correct. And I feel for also Chi and Jade, feel free to jump in anytime. You don't have to wait till you're. I like everyone to be unmuted at the same time so we can all just jump in and have a conversation. So please keep yourselves unmuted. But I'm thinking about, just as we're even, thinking about, as you said, Joshua, equity, it means I give people what they need based on where they're at, right? So I'm not even trying to, elevate and give everyone more if still there's a group that doesn't have enough. And I read the stat, I think yesterday, about how there's 617 billionaires in this country. 617 billionaires in this country.
113
and
in New York State.
113 are in New York State.
Yes.
And they've earned in the pandemic more money than the GDP of the bottom half of this country. And so thinking about that, how can we ever stop this ball that's rolling so fast in the direction of, social economic disparity and division, unless someone stops and says, I'm giving my money away, or I'm giving my time away, or I'm giving my resources away. And so, Jade, you were talking about time, energy, and resources, that it requires those things to be actually dispersed and to be shared in order for us to think about, how we actually create the change that we want to see. So I do want to shift to that a little bit, because the pandemic has put us all in a position where, I think I saw on my Yahoo Finance this morning, there was like another 467,000 jobless claims in America. There's this a bunch every week. And so, obviously Black and brown people are disproportionately affected by it. And how do we actually start to think now financially, right, about our futures? What are ways that we can actually re-enter if we're not getting someone who's going to be an advocate for us to stop and say, I'm going to use my time, energy, and my resources to help Black and brown communities, or just communities that have been in despair? How do we create the systems that are necessary for us to provide financial stability and longevity in our communities? What's in place? What are you doing? And how do you actually, provide those things and share with us your thoughts on that? So, Josh, I'm going to start with you first. Just thinking about, you're actually in a position where about to be done with law school in about a year, which means now there's a chance for economic and social mobility for you in significant ways. And maybe even changing the trajectory for your own family and background as well. But as we think about finances and time and energy and resources, what can we do in our own mind, in our own self-advocacy, to make sure that this pandemic doesn't leave us in a worse position than we already are in?
Well, this is a perfect time for me to plug CUNY Law School. I necessarily didn't go to law school to make money, to be rich, but I went to law school to help people. And so when we talk about money and longevity, we first have to talk about health and all the other things that affect people that look like me. And so specifically, I can only look at a program that I saw work, right? Before you talk about money, first you got to talk about education, right? And so at Medgar Evers College, there's another candidate that's running for District 36, Robert Waterman, who was a part of the BMI program. We created a barbershop at Medgar Evers College where we had brothers that were dropping out of school or wasn't coming back to school. And we brought barbers to the school so that they could cut young men hair. And so while they was cutting young men hair, we were slipping information like, dude, if you don't officially withdraw, that can affect your financial aid, and then you have a bill. So then you can't maybe come back to the school unless you pay that bill, etc. So we would drop information and useful tools. And so I look at the barbershop as the mecca for the Black man in America, because there's no other place where Black men can go and talk candidly, get information, be themselves. And so I really lift up that model. And I also highlight the barbershops because that's where you're talking about, yo, brother, you got to exercise. Yo, dude, you have to invest your money. Yo, dude, you have to, marry this woman, or this person. Yo, you have to take care of your kids. Before we could get to financial stability, we have to knock down all those other things too. And so I really like the barbershop, and LeBron James got it on HBO. A lot of people are bigging that up because the barbershop is where people like myself go to and get counseling. That's our therapist. You hear Black people, there's a campaign, right? Before we talk about financial literacy, we have to first talk about our mental health, right? And there's a campaign, oh, Black folks don't go to the therapy. I got a therapist. He's the one that cut my hair. That's where it's all at. And so that's where
it's a good start, at least. It's a good start.
It's a good start, but to say that we don't have a place where we conjugate or have a place where we're talking those issues out and we're keeping them in our head, that's just not true. Mm-hmm. And so I like that model because I feel like that is a place where we could start. Like you said, that's a good start. And that's where we start. Having safe places. Mm-hmm. to talk about those issues that are affecting us before we get to financial literacy.
Well, shout out to MDEC, Male Development Empowerment Cooperative at Medgar Evers College, a CUNY BMI project that was doing that great barbershop sessions for so long. It was so great. And Robert Waterman was a great BMI director for the time he was with us. Great community there, great places to share, having those conversations about financial literacy and the things that a lot of times our young people did not get a chance to speak about with their families and their parents and whoever was around. So understand the importance of that congregation of fellow partners who are going through life with you, who you can share with. I appreciate that perspective so much. Jade, I want to pivot to you and just thinking about this question. What are your thoughts about how we pivot and what do we need to engage and to give ourselves a chance to have financial sustainability in this country?
I just have to take it back to one of my teachers, Dr. Claude Anderson. We need to practice and teach powernomics. The sooner we teach powernomics to Black children, the better off they'll be by the time they get to college or, after they graduate from high school. We need to be practicing vertical integration and industrializing our community, practicing self-determination, and also redesigning education, economics, politics, and religion, and seeing those things working in tandem to empower us and for us to see ourselves as our own agents of change, and for us to really be competitive, in the job market, academically and otherwise. And so, we can't just sit on our hands and say, unfortunately, elected officials, these administrations, these corporations are not supporting us. We have a lot of capital within our own community to really build and transform and really practice, again, self-determination. So that's my the main thing I will offer. Go over to powernomics.com or get the book Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson, and we should start to practice that.
Yeah. So two things I think might need some clarity for our audience. Vertical integration. Can you explain a little bit about what that means?
It would take a while, but basically we need to be able to we need to be in manufacturing, distribution, and really creating Black businesses in a way that we control the entire market for the things that we're consuming. And then we need to use the capital gained from that in order to run our own politicians on our own, using our own agendas, and to get them to affect the politics of our surrounding communities, and to really focus on industrialism. It's really, instead of going to college to get a degree to go work for someone else, we need to be practicing using education as a tool in order for us to start our own businesses so that we can build a Black economy, so that we can buy our own politicians that will carry out our own agendas, and also develop a new relationship with our vote. This is also a part of the model, is that your vote is a business transaction. It is not like going to church once a month and taking Holy Communion, right? It's not a sacrament. You don't just do it, out of a ritual. It is an actual quid pro quo. And so that Black folks should really leverage our votes, for our own interest. But we're in this position we're in politically, unfortunately, because we don't have the economics to enforce sanctions on elected officials who take our votes in exchange for nothing. So all of this, plays into that model.
Yeah. Well, I love that idea, because I think until someone explains it to you, you think, well, there's this product that I like and I buy it. And if I want to be a business owner, I have to just make that product. But you don't think about the actual chain of command that goes up from the beginning of the process of envisioning the shoe and the machinery that it takes to design it, and the marketing that goes around it, and all the different levels of the supply chain, from the point of the idea to the execution of creating the shoe to actually interacting with the customer who's buying the shoe, right? And so now realizing that there's so many people who have their hands in the pockets of the Nikes and the Adidas and the Pumas because they have maybe the rights to designing, or maybe the rights to the machine that creates the stitching, or the rights to so this distribution of the shoe, right? So understanding that supply chain is important for us to be a part of at every single level. And that's really bossing up. That's some good boss moves right there. And then secondly, Dr. Claude Anderson, I think, did he teach at Temple when you were there, or at UMBC?
Dr. Anderson wasn't at Temple.
No.
I'm not sure. I think maybe UMBC, but he worked in the Clinton administration. He's had a long career, and he's still doing interviews, by the way. You can check him out. He did an interview on Your Black World and also Dr. Boyce Watkins TV, same interview. He did it last week, and he really spoke to what's happening right now and why we're in the situation that we're in right now. And he really broke down racism from his perspective, which is like, folks come to America to compete, in capitalism and to participate in that. And what is that? What are those implications for us? And what do we need to be doing in order to be able to build and sustain and safeguard our community economically, politically, and otherwise? So yeah, he's still teaching, and he's still doing interviews.
Gotcha. Yeah, he's got a long history of being involved in different levels of just dedicating us to powernomics, and also just helping the Black community understand their economic power in general. I love that. So when you said he taught you, at first I was thinking he was at a university that you were at, but makes sense.
Masterclass. I think it was maybe it was last year or into this year. So he did a Powernomics masterclass. So he does teach classes through the business school as well. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Chi, pivot to you. Just thinking about that, right? What are the self-sustaining financial behaviors that we could have, that we need to create a Black sustainable economy?
I mean, financial literacy definitely is on the top there. Just speaking on a local level, in the United States, 44% of Black businesses went out of business during this past pandemic. When it comes to achieving, I'm a son of a local business owner. When it comes to keeping, businesses afloat, businesses will approach SBS or banks within our cities to ask for grants to stay afloat. Yet Black businesses are disproportionately denied those grants. What we need within our communities is more Black banks, even a public bank within our communities that are representative of the people within our communities, banks that are owned by us and for us, so that when it comes to equity, whether it's through grants or through loans and purchasing a home, it's being heard by individuals that look like us, that know our history, which increases the chance of keeping us afloat, whether it's through our businesses, whether it's through home ownership. I also do believe civics education within our public education systems is extremely important. All skin folk ain't kinfolk. That is a reason why I am running. When you just look at the oligarchy that is politics here in the United States, there are individuals that are leading for or governing for the people that are putting money into their pockets rather than the people that they represent. So I think civics education for our people, so that they know that not just any Democrat, not just any Black person is someone that you should vote for. It should be someone that is actually going to be putting forward legislation and action that will propel our communities forward. I'm definitely proposing and working and helping push the bill that will push for a public bank here in New York City. I think that is it will push our communities forward in terms of equity, fiscal equity, as well as helping our Black businesses, our MWBEs, minority and women-owned businesses and enterprises. I think that nurturing those businesses within our communities helps push us forward, not only fiscally, but in a cultural way as well.
Yeah, certainly. That's a huge idea, the public banks. Mm-hmm. And so can you give me some more tenets of what the public bank would do? How would it be erected and how would it operate?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is already a bill that's sitting pushed by an organization called the Public Bank. It is a municipal owned bank. and it will be, I think, distributed amongst our EDs here, our election districts here in New York City. Not EDs, but city council districts here in New York City. So there'll be, distinguished banks per communities. So it's not just these white collar white men listening to us about what we need money for. It's our taxpayer dollars going into these banks, giving us grants, giving us loans, listening to what we need in order to, I guess, propel forward in society. But it's also municipally funded. It's all public information, and it's owned by us. I mean, I guess, I don't know if Joshua touched on capitalism a little earlier today, and then we also talked about the amount of billionaires that are here in this country. But I do believe we need to go into this direction of social democracy by putting BIPOC people at the forefront. There is another bill on the New York State legislature that is calling to tax the rich, as in the billionaires, by at least 10% here in New York State. All of that money will funnel into public banks here in New York City, in our respective communities, providing our people the equity that they need in order to advance in their communities or in the city as a whole.
That's powerful. And so how do people find out about this? Like, how do they actually participate? Is there a website or some sort of link to learn more?
Well, it doesn't exist yet. I mean, this is a bill that will be pushed on the city level. Hopefully, if we have like-minded individuals like myself in the city council, we will be advocating for this to become, a reality here within the city. There are new leaders with creative ideas that are pushing ideas like a public bank, like public power here in New York City, that will advance communities of color enormously.
Significantly, sure, for sure.
But look up public bank, look up the idea, look up the bill that exists on the New York level, because it's something that should happen here in the city.
That is awesome. Will do. That's very powerful. And so thinking about that self-advocacy in the public bank and the ability for us to actually use community dollars to support the community, we think about all the time how, especially when it comes to police officers and the police forces, how there's sort of a siphoning of the dollar from the Black community, because a lot of times the people who work in those communities are living in other communities, but they're getting paid from the tax dollars of the community that they work for. So they're kind of earning their money in Harlem, going up and living in White Plains and spending their money in White Plains, right? And so money's going into them and then it's going right out. And so obviously there are some reasons why that might be. Some people say it's a safety thing to not live in the neighborhood that you're policing, but there shouldn't be a problem with safety if you're actually acting right in the first place. And so there's all these sort of different things about self-advocacy. And so I want to kind of pivot to just maybe our last big question of our time together and thinking about sort of the advocacy. We have a lot of people who are in college who are watching this broadcast. They're watching these interviews. They're CUNY students, and they're trying to figure out for themselves, the ways to actually encourage themselves to be bold in their decision making about their future, their careers. That really gives them the best chance of self-advocacy, and also gives them the best chance of understanding that that they have a community around them, how they can benefit from that. So when you think about sort of the safe spaces that young people should benefit from, that actually encourages them to self-advocate, what are the safe spaces in mind that you think, or you can encourage our young people who are watching this broadcast to really be a part of, that really gives them that sense of inner confidence, that gives them that sense of they belong, their voice matters, they can create the financial freedom they want, they can do all the things we've been talking about today? What are the safe spaces that need to be in place to empower our young people to reject notions of not being accepted and to really embrace notions of self-advocacy and sustainability? And so I'm going to start with Chi first, and then we'll come back around to Joshua and then to Jade. But what safe spaces, what do our young people need to hear to give them that sort of idea of safe spaces they can be a part of that creates that self-sustained, self-advocacy perspective?
That's an interesting question. I mean, for me, I got to running this campaign off of, protesting this past year. I think being on the ground, being around people that look like you, from all different sectors of the Black African diaspora, and hearing us a voice or power, is a safe space. I do have to shout out this group of individuals that go out every Thursday called the Stonewall protests. And they are Black trans led here in New York City, and they hold space, every Thursday, talking about issues about race, about gender, about being black and trans, about being Black, and those are some of the spaces that feel safe. It's everyone. Kind of from all over the world and all over our country sharing, their pain and their joy and their culture in one space. I would say that's, a safe space where I felt liberated in one way, shape, or form. And, I guess this might not be said for, every campaign, but I feel like a campaign like mine is extremely exhilarating to work on, to volunteer on, to be within, because I am a young person that is breaking these obstacles that have been placed in front of me. Whether it's through my age, through my race, my sexual orientation, and seeing the strides that we are making. Has from what I've heard from people that have volunteered or have been on our team, that it is a safe space and something that gives them hope, not only for the future of the city or this district, but within any respective field of work that they want to go into.
Sure, it makes a lot of sense. And so, Chi, how old are you, if you're willing to share?
I'm 23. I just turned 23 on March 18th. We've outraised every single person in this race, most in-district donors, most individual donors, lowest contribution average, most amount of volunteers. I really didn't think we have a chance to win this race. And there's always the haters out on the campaign field telling me that I'm too young to do this, but I think they're just jealous.
I love that. It's so great, Chi. I think it's incredible. And you are not too young, my friend. I think I have this really strong feeling about this sense of, it's not my own original principle, but this idea of interbeing and how we all essentially just embody spirits that are from other people and that have been passed down from generations before us. So that's why it's so hard to kill us off, because we have the resilience that comes from ancestors and from people who've been doing this work for a while. And so you have that spirit, and it's been given to you. And so therefore, using that power responsibly is very wise of you to do. And also just thinking about, too, the idea that you are 23, getting endorsements from the Working Party's Families Party. That's a huge accomplishment. I think it's amazing what's happening in your world, and that idea that we can follow you and support your campaign. Really quickly, just verbalize for us, how do we do that? Where is your website? How do we follow you?
Absolutely. Check out my website, OSE2021.com, OSSE2021. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, OSE2021. And if you want to volunteer, we have, 30 days now until early voting starts. Come out with us, phone bank with us, door knock with us, text bank with us. It's time for not only this community, but for this city to see some real change, to elect some people that aren't tied to these large scale donors that are putting profits over people. We need individuals that will finally co-govern with us, and create the society that puts the working class, the vulnerable classes, trans people, queer people, immigrants, tenants at the forefront, because we are the backbone of society.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just real quick, just to kind of wrap, one more follow-up. You mentioned how protesting sort of also illuminated your pathway to where you are now. Can you talk a little bit about that, the why behind that, and what you saw that made you feel like, oh, this is the time to jump in?
Absolutely. Yeah, I never thought I would run for a political seat before. I am a creative. I love to DJ. I love music. I love fashion. And that was the world that I was working in, especially in event production. That entire world was flipped on its head when the pandemic hit. When George Floyd was murdered, like many Americans, I was unable to look away from my phone and computer and the images that we were seeing with that video, and took to the streets. I was pepper sprayed that first day, and rather than being fearful of the NYPD, which I've always learned and have been taught to be aware of their injustices, I continued going out, every single day after that. Each day I was using my voice. People were following that voice. There were other individuals out there that were sharing the same messages that I was. And we founded our activist collective, Warriors in the Garden. We were at the we were leading many of the main protests at the beginning of last year, helped repeal 50A, are continuing to do mutual aid within communities of color. But as an individual that was on the ground and being disappointed by the leadership within my district and within the city and not seeing people step up with the voice that I have, I took the initiative, jumped into this race. Definitely the craziest thing I've ever done, but it seems to be working out, and I'm really proud of the movements that we've brought to this political stage.
That's fantastic. We're proud of you too.
Thank you.
And happy to support in any way we can, especially when it comes to sexual identity and sexual orientation. A lot of times in the Black and Brown community, there can be very polarized perspectives, but we at CUNY BMI are very supportive and allies for all of our brothers and sisters and Zs and who are in the LGBTQA plus community. So thanks for illuminating that for us. And we're excited to see what's going to happen for you and support you along the way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So Joshua, what safe spaces are needed for us to continue to improve self-advocacy and self-sustainability?
Yeah, so before, I guess I didn't want to get lost in the sauce with talking about the barbershop, but because that's the safe space. But before we could talk about financial literacy, right? If 18% of Black men are reading proficiently, and 34% of Black men are incarcerated, right? Not 34%, but the incarceration population makes up 34% of Black men, when we only 13% of the population, right? I mean, my grandparents paid into Social Security, but died before they was able to get it. The life expectancy. So when we talk about those things, safe place for me to go to is the barbershop. That's where I go and get that information. So that's the connection point I wanted to make with that last answer to that last question. But more specifically, speaking to my people in CUNY, going into CUNY Law School, I was not prepared for that. Law school put me smack on my butt. I did not know. I was trying to find my safe space. The Pipeline to Justice program, which is a BMI program, was really helpful. But, I needed to find a space where people that look like me, people that was going to support me. And that's where I found the CUNY Balsa. I just want to shout out to our graduating class tomorrow. Class of 2021. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for some of those students that, reached back and grabbed me and said, nah, you got this, you could do this. And so, yeah, what I would tell CUNY students, college students, students in general, find your club. If there's no club that speaks to you, create one, and that's where you can advocate for the things that you need, because those clubs, when it's not just Joshua Davis going to the president or the dean to say this is wrong, you have a collective body and you guys can flesh out those issues that you're having. So I would say, find your club. If you don't have a club, get with a friend and say, look, there's not a club that speaks to this issue. Let's join together and let's create a club. Let's get some signatures, let's create a club, and let's hold meetings every other week and talk about this, and we can help each other and advocate for each other. And that also produces real results, right? I started a mentoring program when I was in high school that went to 3 different high schools, 6 programs. And, the principal said, Josh, I don't know if it's your mentoring program or we just got a new set of smart freshmen, but there's a real correlation between attendance and grades going up. So when you have a group, when you have a crew, when you have a team behind you that supports you, when you find that safe space, you will have better results than doing it by yourself. It takes a village. No one can do it by itself. And so that's what I tell my students, not my students, my fellow students, find your space. If you don't have a space, build one, create one, and you got this.
Yeah, love that. I think it's so important. I mean, I don't really go to the barbershop anymore. But I think it's so important that, what you're saying is so true, because a lot of that soft knowledge, I call it, that information that's just shared between friends and colleagues is the kind of stuff that, advantage groups have been sharing on the golf club or sharing in certain private circles for many years and generations. And so now we're creating our own versions of those and having our own safe spaces to be able to speak freely and openly. Also, too, I keep hearing this constant theme of just, talking to people who look like you, who might have a similar background, and the impact of that for your future careers and for your future lives. And so, Jay, maybe you can kind of wrap us up here. Just thinking about, real quick, Joshua, where do we find you? How do we follow you? Is there anything social media you want to share with us?
Yes, my Instagram is Joel_Joshua, JOELL_Joshua. Chi, I just followed you on Instagram. I can't wait to get Jade information. But yeah, you can always reach out. I'm always down to help you in whatever capacity I can. I'm rooting for you, especially the CUNY students. Just to go back, 5% of lawyers are Black, and so when I embarked on this law school journey, it wasn't all a cakewalk, so that 5% means something. It's saying that, nah, this is not your club, you don't belong here. And so when you have groups like BOLSA, the Black Law Student Association, who will take you under and say, look, we got you, we're going to help you, we're going to support you, that is that's powerful, man, and that's meaningful, and that really helps. Those finding that safe space and that crew, that team, or creating that is really important to your success. So I just I want to plug BOLSA in one more time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm following everybody now as I'm trying to find everyone on the social media. So Jade, if you wouldn't mind just wrapping us up, I'll repeat the question one last time. Just what are the safe spaces necessary for us to continue to improve self-sustainability, self-advocacy going forward? And also too, I'm curious, you mentioned a couple role models, just like who are some people who maybe were like you or you kind of emulate in terms of like developing your own career trajectory?
Oh, wow. So many
No pressure.
That's a hard question. Maybe I can get back to that one after. Just so
okay.
Yeah. But Dr. Molefe Asante's work has definitely impacted me as a teenager. I'm really drawn to his work. I'm really drawn to, my role model would be Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and what she was able to do in terms of Black psychology and really understanding what white supremacy is, through that lens. Also, the scholarship of Dr. John Henry Clark. There's so many people. But to answer the question about safe spaces, it's along the same theme as my co-panelist, which is creating racial affinity groups, affinity spaces that are safe spaces for us to talk about how macroaggressions, I don't call them macroaggressions, various forms of oppression affect us as melanated people in the skin we're in as we go through life, our educational careers, our work careers, etc. So, and using those spaces as spaces to really understand what white supremacy is and how it functions in all 9 areas of people activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war, and counterwar within that war category, and really seeing white supremacy itself as not just policies, but also just as a global prison system, right, that affects non-white people the world over, and figuring out ways to break out of that prison system and to replace it with a system of justice. So I definitely think that we should come together and have those sorts of racial affinity groups, and then to use that time to really push back on policies, right? To do letter writing campaigns, to organize within racial affinity groups, to show up at public hearings and meetings, to give public testimony on bills, to provide feedback for our various stakeholder groups in order to advance our own interests. I think there's power in doing that. I think that like coming together and to talk about race and the impact of race can be therapeutic. We definitely should be finding safe spaces like on the couches of therapists, because there's a level of trauma that comes along with, us sustaining this stuff. And also Dr. Joy DeGruy who I've had the honor and privilege to learn from as well, I would say is like a great role model of mine. But we definitely have to really focus on producing healing, but then also being in action around policy. A conversation is just a conversation, but if it's not translating into systemic change through policy, and also resources and protections into our community, then we could, be putting more energy into those things to have more long-term impact. You can find me. My email address is jade@victorypeoplemovement.com. That's jade@victorypeoplemovement.com. You can also go over and enroll in my course. I teach a course called Unapologetic Black Power, and you can access that on flynubianpower.com. And so, yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. Are you on IG, by the way? Did you say that already? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I am on IG. My IG is Lioness Crowned on Instagram, Lioness Crowned. I always tell people I don't need followers, I need soldiers. So if we're going to get together and organize and get some work done, cool. But yeah, I'm not on social media as much.
Got you. That's perfect. Perfect. Awesome. I do want to give one last question from the audience before we do start wrapping up. But just, someone just asked, I think it's a really great question to close on. The CUNY BMI, we do this conference every year. It happens typically the first Friday of October. And for the 16th annual conference, we're focusing on mental health and the importance of maintaining it and sustaining ourselves. And so the question that came from the audience is that during this time where we have the perfect conflation of a pandemic and the social and political challenges that we're experiencing, how do you maintain self-care and the practice of the challenges that are happening today, especially when you're talking to other young people who are on the verge of following you or being soldiers with you in a movement? How do you encourage self-care as a main practice or a means of doing the work so that people aren't burnt out and they're not just doing it from a place of being, I guess, literally just exhausted? And so how do you prioritize self-care? So I guess we'll start with Joshua and then Jade, and then we'll close out with Chi. Joshua.
Man, the pandemic, being on that quarantine, took me away from my barber for a minute. And that was a problem because that was my self-care agent. But then I discovered other stuff, like skincare routines. I bought a little clipper, tried, but didn't work out, as you can see up here. I'm about to be like Sean in a little bit.
Welcome home, brother. Welcome home.
But no. So look, if I could speak to that person that asked that or the audience, I come from a kind of a background where men are not supposed to cry, men are not supposed to be emotional, men are not supposed to do this or that. And, so that's what I was kind of grew up believing. And I could just say this, when I started to really take deep breaths, meditate, and relieve some stress and confront those emotional issues that I was facing, which was all meant to, everything got better. So what's the self-care routine that I do? I try to meditate. Sometimes I start thinking about other stuff. So I try to do it really small. I go for walks. That's one thing. I wake up, go for a walk, always go for a walk before I start anything. That's my meditation. So I always do that. I try to leave the phone in the other room when I'm doing some work to keep me focused on my one task. And I try to do a skincare routine. I like doing that. I think we should do that. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you. That's some good stuff right there. Good luck with the barber. Good luck with everything with your hairline. But just come on home, brother. It's time. Welcome. All right, Jade. Self-care. What does that mean to you?
Did you just say good luck with his hairline?
I did.
That.
That was awesome. So for self-care, definitely therapy. Absolutely. If you're looking for a good Black therapist, I highly recommend blacktherapycentral.com. That's blacktherapycentral.com. Yes. And ashe to walking, definitely going outside, walking, going to the gym, working out is good stuff. And what's really, really, really helped me is fasting from social media and fasting from the lamestream or mainstream news media. I did an extensive amount of coverage last year on Fly Nubian Queen Network. I was at the White House. I was in DC. I was in these streets. I sustained a tremendous amount of post-traumatic stress syndrome from flashbangs and rubber bullets and all types of things. So I definitely understand where the candidate is coming from in terms of what it takes to be out there all the time. And also, there's a lot of noise and a lot of misinformation and a lot of just insidious agendas that perpetuate racism anyway on the internet and also on social media. So I say, protect your mind, protect your energy. And then also what's helped me is staying away from, I call it like trauma porn or lynching porn. So when a Black person is killed and that body camera footage comes out and everyone's sharing it, you don't have to click on it. You don't have to watch it. And you can actually say, please don't send me that. Like, I am protecting my energy, right? And that enables me and it strengthens me to continue to fight this fight every day. When we're talking about policy change, systemic change, and educating adults and educating our youth and creating new innovative ways and practices for anti-racism.
That's powerful. That's really good. The trauma porn piece is huge because, you know, there is this sort of compelling behavior that we have to see trauma. That's why the news makes so much money and the news sources are always going to be relevant because people actually want to live in that place of anxiety and that anxious brain. And if you're not doing self-care, you think that's normal to be in a position of always anxiety, always looking at trauma, always looking at what's going wrong, as opposed to being in a place of resourcefulness and growth and curiosity and the things that, you know, actually bring about balance and health and healthy perspectives as well. So I appreciate that very much. And that blacktherapycentral.com, that will be used. We're going to share that as a resource on YouTube. So I just appreciate all of you for taking the time to be with us. We share this with our students, again, across 31 programs, across 25 CUNY schools who are being supported by the CUNY Black Male Initiative. And our mission is to, again, just to advance for graduation rates and support for Black and Latino males primarily, but for all students who want to be a part of the CUNY Black Male Initiative experience. So your voices matter. Thank you. Keep doing what you do. Jade, we'll have you back in a couple months. Seems like it's a rhythm now. So we'll try to make sure we're not overusing you. But thank you for just offering your voice consistently. Chi, thank you for doing what you're doing and leading in our community. We need it and we learn from you. So thank you for being who you are. Joshua, thank you for your honesty and your transparency and just being a part of a community that matters. And we wish you the best of luck in your 3L year. And I believe everyone had a chance to answer. I don't know. Oh, Chi, you're the last one to go. So I want you to just kind of close this out today with self-care. What does it look like for you? And how do we wrap this up?
Sure. I'm a big runner. I like to run. It helps me clear my mind. I like to say, you know, don't take yourself too seriously, but do things seriously. I love laughing. I love being around people that make me laugh now that a lot of us are vaccinated. Yeah, and skincare is great. I'm also a practicing Nichiren Buddhist, so meditation and chanting is huge in my regimen, and playing chess as well. Things that clear the mind, but are also working the mind as well.
Yeah, love that. And I love that the self-care practices that are mentioned in are really you and yourself. A lot of times people think self-care means hanging out with other people. And it's like, no, that's not self-care. That's other people caring for you. Spend time with yourself. You know, those activities you all mentioned are about you, clearing that space for you. I love that. So thanks again for everything. And for those who are watching, we encourage you to follow us at CUNY BMI on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and youtube.com/CUNY BMI, where you're probably watching this live now or as a recorded message. We look forward to continue to support the students who are in CUNY BMI, as well as the community around us that's supporting us. And we look forward to seeing you again next time as we end the year up very strong. And as a reminder, save the date, September 29th and October 1st, the 16th annual CUNY BMI conference focused on mental health, hosted by Kingsborough Community College. So we'll be sending information out to you soon. Be well, have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, all.
Thank you.